Mary from Mansfield is a man in all respects save one. He feels he's a woman trapped in a man's body. In Britain, there are estimated to be 750 men like Mary and 250 women who feel they should be men. They're known as transsexuals. This week, they're the subject of a recommendation before the European Court of Human Rights that they be given the right to marry and officially reassign their birth certificates after undergoing controversial surgery to change their sex.
I don't think most of the public know what a transsexual is. They're apt to think of them as some sex maniac, I think.
I think too many people confuse it with homosexuality and transvestism.
Transsexuals feel that they've been born to the wrong sex, they've been cheated in some way.
I think with all the people with whom I've tried to help over these years, they have always been bewildered by the fact that they started out being bewildered over their identity, their sexuality, and have come to me or to anybody else in my profession saying, "What am I?"
Transsexuals live in a twilight world of fear, loneliness and ignorance, even amongst doctors.
The client, I hesitate to call them patients, comes to the GP and says, "I wish to change my sex." Now, of course, there is no such thing as a sex change. No one has ever changed sex. The GP knows this, but he probably doesn't know much about transsexualism. His first duty, I think, is to his patient, and he very often sends him straight into the local mental hospital, unfortunately, thinking of it as a form of mental aberration. But for the most part, the medical profession are very reluctant indeed to accept the fact that transsexuals exist.
I did fairly well for myself and was deputy head girl. But throughout that time, certainly up to 10, I knew there was something wrong with me. I never fitted in. I didn't really have ever close friends.
Well, I was in a public school, and then because my father was in the Indian Army, gravitated towards the army and went through Sandhurst, eventually out to India, where I joined an Indian regiment on the northwest frontier. I think when I came through for my operations and things, I'm sure that only one in about 100 GPs had ever probably heard of the transsexual. I know that my GP knew nothing about it.
Many people think that if they go to a surgeon and get what I would call a nip and tuck operation, that's going from male to female, they're all home and dry and everything's fine, but it isn't.
In women, it involves the removal of the breasts, the removal of the ovaries, the removal of the uterus, and some surgeons have endeavoured to even construct a penis, although it's not an erecting organ. In the male, it involves removal of most of the penis, the testes, the use of the scrotum to construct labia to look like the female vulva, and the insertion of a skin graft to construct a vagina. So it really is quite large-scale surgery.
As I went into the anaesthetic, my doctor, who was French-Moroccan, said, "Au revoir, monsieur." And when I woke up, he said, "Bonjour, madame," mademoiselle rather. And so it really was a fairy tale.
20 years ago, George Jameson became April Ashley and a celebrity.
I was brought up strictly as a boy. And so therefore, there was an enormous battle the whole time going on inside me, that I knew I was growing up to be one thing, and yet I was supposed to be another. I mean, if you had an enormous wart on your nose, and it was blinding you, you would want it off, wouldn't you? Well, I was a woman, and I wanted what was necessary to be removed.
You had your operation done in Casablanca?
I had it done in Casablanca. I didn't have any of the nonsense that they have to go through in England, where they have to go through it in stages, and where you have to do it over a period of 18 months or something. I did it, it was done in 4 hours or 5 hours. No, 5 to 7 hours my operation took. I mean, and it was done as simple as that.
For private patients in Casablanca, it's still as simple as that. But in Britain, where the health service offers operations under certain circumstances, it's infinitely more complex. Mary, born Lee, is just beginning the long road to what they call the op.
Well, I was registered as a boy, but at the age of 4 I first had feelings of transsexuality. I felt as if I wanted to play with girls more than boys, and I always felt the odd one out in the group of friends I had at an early age. I first dressed as a girl when I was, I think, about 13, and I remember at the time I felt so relaxed, and I felt a feeling of happiness which I'd never known before. Because I felt and looked like a girl, and I wanted to live as one. I wanted to go out as a girl. I couldn't tell my parents at this time. I told them when I was 17, and I was only 16 at this time, because I thought actually they would reject me and perhaps even turn me out of the house. And I didn't have a single friend at the time either, so I wasn't able to go out in the evenings to any places like discos or anything. Mainly because of the reason, even in male clothes, I looked like a girl. I remember once I walked past a girl and she gave me the most hostile glare I'd ever known. And I could read her expression. She was literally saying, "You're not supposed to look like us."
Oh, it looks ever so pretty. What do you think of it?
It's quite a nice fit, but does it look loose?
No, not at all. I mean, it fits you on the hips, and down here it's meant to be loose. Anyway.
To be eligible for an operation,
Looks nice.
you must fulfill at least 3 conditions. You must cross-dress, wear the clothes and play the role of the opposite sex for at least 2 years, get divorced if previously married, and convince specialist assessors during long and harrowing consultations that you really mean what you say.
Penis offends you?
Yes.
Yes. From about 13, you began to actually dress occasionally in your mother's clothes, although you had wanted to do so from 7. You'd restrained the impulse till 13 or so.
Yes.
And you would put on her bras and pad them out, put on her knickers, and pretend to the mirror that you were a girl.
Yes, that's right. I felt an overwhelming sense of relaxation.
In fact, when the other children at school spoke about sexual matters, you would avoid them and go away.
That's right, yes.
Yes.
But when I told my parents, they were deeply shocked. They never expected it in any way, but they knew I'd been very upset about something. And when I did eventually tell them, they at least sympathised with me. But then after a few weeks, they began to turn rather cold towards the whole subject. They didn't want to see me dressed, and they didn't even want me to mention the subject. It was just as if they were trying to pretend it wasn't there. And this caused me a great deal of suffering, because I felt so alone in the world.
And your father's job, he was a constable?
That's right, yes.
Yes. Was he a fairly severe, authoritarian sort of figure?
Yes, he was, actually.
A bit distant, unapproachable?
Not really distant, but...
Great stress is laid during consultations on the client's family background. Did the parents really want a little girl? Did they ever dress the child in the clothes of the opposite sex? 3/4 of the cases dealt with by this doctor revealed fathers who wore official uniform. But most discount parental attitudes as a major factor in producing transsexuality.
When I was 17, I read an article in a woman's magazine about somebody who'd had a sex change. It was then that I realised that, unfortunately, that was me. I wanted one. A lot of people have said to me since I changed over, "Why on earth did you do it? Because you were exceptionally good looking as a woman." I had nice long blonde hair and was feminine and had everything on my side. And I eventually got a technician's job at Manchester Poly. And it was in that job that I changed over, started living full-time as a man in the middle of the job. It was quite amusing. I basically left work and had a fortnight's holiday. And the first day I was away, it was explained to everybody else by my boss that Jackie was going to come back as Stephen. And they had a fortnight in which to practice, "Hi, Steve." And he collected me for work when I was coming back, because he knew damn well otherwise I'd be so frightened I just simply wouldn't make it.
Hormone treatment over 2 years slimmed his hips, deepened his voice, and promoted hair growth. An operation removed the breasts and womb.
There isn't any operations in this country to produce a penis. If you've got $30,000 or whatever it is, you can go to the States and get quite a good job with a hydraulic jack in it and God knows what else.
In fact, an operation to produce a penis is available in certain circumstances.
They can't have intercourse. That is impossible. They can certainly pee out of it. And if he feels better as a man, more complete, and he has to change at work into overalls or into uniform, I'm sure that it can be done on the health service.
Female to males obviously have a problem with breasts. You're not going to get your surgery to remove the breasts for 2 years at least, maybe even more. So you've got to do something to hide the breasts. And the standard way, when I first started out, was to use a form of sticky bandage that was on the market. Terrible stuff, which you'd bind round yourself. I'd have to leave, because of the price of it, you'd have to leave it on for about a fortnight, which meant bathing all the bits in between. But the first time I ever did it, I knew another female to male, and he gave me a lot of advice, and he actually strapped up my chest, and we went out shopping up to the local Oxfam shop to buy some shirts and jackets. And on the way back, I remember it was the first time I ever went into a gents' toilet. It was a fairly rough area of Manchester I was living in at the time. I walked into this gents absolutely petrified, and there was a policeman stood there using it at the same time. Luckily there were cubicles, because that's always a problem, whether there are cubicles or not. I mean, there are so many pubs in this country still without cubicles, and you have to start the evening with your legs crossed.
The first call of nature while cross-dressed in public poses yet another dilemma for transsexuals. Mary Lee recalls the moment of truth.
Well, I had to make a very quick decision. I went straight into the ladies. There was nothing else I could do. At least I stood a better chance of success if I did go into the ladies. I mean, if I went into the gents, I would immediately be arrested.
When I first went out cross-dressed, it was in the days when I'd been on the gay scene as a lesbian. I explained to a lot of my lesbian friends that really I didn't fit in, and the truth of the matter is that I wanted to be a bloke. And some were quite hostile to it, but a few were sort of said, well, you must do what you want to do. And they raided their own wardrobes for various bits of clothing from their old butch days. And I went out into Manchester wearing a jacket and a tie and looking reasonably. And I went to a pub in the centre of Manchester that was a fairly popular place for gay people to meet and also for straight people. I walked into this pub and walked past and up to the bar and was about to drink my drink when I looked back, and there was a lady perusing me quite closely who happened to be my mother, who'd gone out that evening with some friends, at which point I left the drink and vanished up the back stairs. I don't know how one could describe the feeling of absolute terror in oneself. It's a feeling that all transsexuals go through, and only transsexuals can ever understand how immense that feeling of terror is.
With 1.5 million unemployed, finding a job is difficult enough. But if you're jobless and transsexual, you're liable to find yourself at the end of the queue.
Well, I really would like to work as a girl, perhaps in some clerical job. But being transsexual, it's going to be very difficult for me to get a job, as I've already experienced. It seems that if they know you're transsexual, they won't take you on, because this would cause, or could cause, some problems with workmates.
Changing from male to female, they can, with luck, get a pension at 60, and of course the others have to work until 65, luckily for you and me. Marriage is impossible now. It's not legal. The church will give a blessing, or some members of the Church of England will give a blessing, and if you have the money you can have them open. And if you convince the priest that you're not a homosexual, you can have a choir. But legal marriage is impossible after that well-known case in which a ruling was given to that effect.
The dissolution of April Ashley's celebrated marriage to a peer of the realm as a result of that ruling has affected all transsexuals. April now lives in Herefordshire.
I don't think I could have had a better life. I think I've had a marvellous life to come out of the back streets of Liverpool, marry a peer of the realm, end up in this beautiful part of the world, have wonderful friends, have quite a few wonderful lovers. What more can you ask for?
After 20, sometimes glamorous years as a woman, April now lives alone in Hay-on-Wye, her isolation broken only by visits from people like Philip, the son of her best friend. The locals are used to her now and accept her for what she is, with one or two small exceptions.
One little boy says, "Hello, Miss Ashley," and I said, "Oh, hello." And the other one said, "Hello, Miss Ashley," and I said, "Hello." And I was so touched, all the tears were streaming down my face, and I got 2 steps further on. One said to the other, "She's a lesbian, you know." So and it just shows they don't even know what they're talking about half the time. God knows what they hear at home. Hi, Paul. Hello, Paul. Still, yeah, I wish we could go disco in Blaisbury tonight.
Yeah.
Morning, April.
Morning, Chris.
What would you like?
Half a bitter and a Coca-Cola, please. When I go into the pub, I'm April. I'm never given any preferential treatment. I have to wait my turn. And in fact, because Hay is such a male-orientated place for fishermen, farmers, horses, horse dealers, studs, sometimes you in fact have to wait until all the men have been served. It's an extraordinary thing.
In part 2, is it a boy? Is it a girl?
Chairs.
Is it a boy? Is it a girl? The first question every parent asks. But unfortunately, in some cases, the sex of a child isn't definitely apparent, and tragic mistakes in registration can occur. Dr. Paul Rayner is the specialist at Birmingham's Children's Hospital.
If the situation is one where the penis hasn't developed very well and is very small, and particularly if it's not certain that this will grow and develop later at puberty, then it may well be better in that situation to rear the individual as a girl. But there are problems with registration. It's relatively easy to change a name, but it's very difficult to change a sex which is assigned to a baby when it's registered.
Sadly, most transsexuals appear to develop their tendencies as they grow up. Very few show any physical abnormalities at birth, and their problems wouldn't show up under current chromosome, hormone, blood and X-ray tests. But startling new research in Germany indicates that transsexuals may in fact have a chemical imbalance hitherto unsuspected. It opens up the possibility of treatment without an operation. But for the present, salvation for most transsexuals comes in hospitals like this one, Charing Cross in London. An average of 60 sex reassignment operations are carried out here each year under the National Health Service. Charing Cross also runs a gender identity clinic, one of 5 in the country, with full pre-op and backup services. The York Clinic at Guy's Hospital is the second London centre. The 3 others are in the provinces, but until recently, Midlands transsexuals had to be referred to London for the operation. Now that's changing. A sexual problems clinic is open at the Queen Elizabeth Medical Centre in Birmingham, offering the complete treatment to those transsexuals who can stay the course.
In the case of those transsexuals where the right solution seems to be to have operative surgery, then we have the appropriate people in the team who are able not only to carry through the very basics of the actual surgery, but also to pay attention to the details and to provide the necessary support both before and after surgery that an individual requires if that's what they choose.
Does it ever worry you as a surgeon that you are creating something that is neither totally male or totally female?
No. The criteria is that you want a happier patient after surgery than you had before, all other things being equal, as long as the emotional state is in a state of equilibrium. I think if you achieve that, that's about as much as you can ask, and then it wouldn't weigh on your conscience.
How many operations have you yourself been involved in?
What, over the years? I don't know, I've given up counting many years ago,
But a
quite
large number, 100 or?
maybe something in that order.
To have a sex reassignment operation carried out privately in Britain can cost you up to £10,000. One transsexual treatment can't be obtained on the health service. Electrolysis, the removal of unwanted hair. But while it isn't absolutely necessary, it's regarded as a must by most male to female transsexuals. It's an intensely tedious and painful procedure involving treatment for 2 hours a week for up to 2 years, and it can cost you a fortune. But some private patients with big bank balances go even further to make a new man or woman of themselves.
There come for secondary procedures such as regarding their nose or their jawline or face lifting or treatment of their skin following electrolysis because it can turn out quite pitted like a bad acne case. They may require breast surgery, and these candidates are polysurgical candidates, which you may regard as rather a neurotic trend, but it isn't really. It's a question that they're pleased with one operation, the effects which have been produced, and if they can afford it or not, they'll save up and have the next stage done until they look as feminine as they possibly can and are satisfied with themselves.
One difficulty is that we don't really know enough to know which cases should have the operation and which should not. And a major centre in the United States that was undertaking a lot of transsexual surgery has been so dissatisfied with the results that they've now abandoned all such surgery. And it may possibly be that surgery should not be part of the treatment of transsexuals, possibly.
But you, doctor, still send people for surgery?
Yes.
Why?
Well, the patients, as I say, are very insistent, and if they can stay the course of the gradual change and they still have determination, it's fair to give them their chance.
The operation is irreversible. George, or Elaine, who runs the Genetic Research Foundation, which seeks other means to treat transsexuals, won't risk the operation. He's made do with a silicone breast implant. SHAFT, the Self-Help Association for Transsexuals, is run by Judy Cousins, formerly Major Lewin Cousins. The 100 or more members will hold their first AGM in the West Midlands this autumn.
And the idea of SHAFT is that, as the words imply, self-help, that we as transsexuals will help other transsexuals, that's self-help within the organisation, and much more important, that the individual transsexual will help himself, because if a person is not willing to help himself, and not willing to take responsibilities for his own future, then it's no point in him continuing with any sort of medical or other action. The other object is to try and make the public aware of the transsexual problem, and it's to make transsexuals less ashamed of being transsexual, and the public more compassionate when it comes to treating transsexuals in whatever way they need to, either family-wise or in the society, or most important as far as work is concerned, because every transsexual has to cross-dress at one stage or another and start living as a woman as opposed to living as a man.
I think SHAFT has a part to play, yes. And certainly Judy herself impresses me very much. She made a very late change of role. She has the 3 things that people need in this situation. She has courage, integrity, and a sense of humour.
I believe that there are some transsexuals whose marriage continues in that they go on living together afterwards, but this is very, very rare.
I think myself, I was incredibly lucky to have no doubts in my mind as to what I was, what I wanted to be, and to go ahead and do it. I think that was remarkably, that was wonderful for me. And I've never regretted it after 20 years. I'm still very happy about the whole thing. And I can't see that changing, quite frankly. But I do think that because there is this tremendous thirst for medical knowledge, that they are being slightly indiscriminate.
This week, a test case is before the European Court of Human Rights concerning a Belgian transsexual. April Ashley is threatening to take the British government to the same court. At stake are their rights to marry and officially change birth certificates. Victory would please some very lonely people.
I would really like to get married and even have children, but I know that will not be physically possible. I could always adopt a few, I suppose.
So I've got an advantage with women in that I'm always a ladies' man. They think, oh, he's ever such a nice bloke, Stephen, you know. Gosh, I could really go above for him. But with a group of men, it's extremely difficult.
I have many friends and I adore them all, but I in fact spend 95% of my time alone, which I like.